And I encourage our folks not to get too hung up on what I consider to be the noise.
You haven't seen any evidence of some sort of inherent political bias in the agency?
No.
Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge following all of it for us. She joins us now on Capitol Hill with the latest. Catherine?
Thank you, Harris. The FBI Director Christopher Wray gave a forceful and passionate defense of the Bureau's nearly 40,000 employees, but he made no reference to the half-dozen senior executives that have been demoted, retired, reassigned, or have left the Bureau since FBI Director James Comey was fired by the president last year. On Russia, the committee's ranking Democrat, Senator John Warner, laid out the case that when it comes to election interference, the Russians are still at it.
I believe in many ways we're no better prepared than we were in 2016. Make no mistake, this threat did not begin in 2016, and it certainly didn't end with the election. What we are seeing is a continuous assault by Russia to target and undermine our democratic institutions, and they're going to keep coming at us.
Throughout the three-hour hearing, we heard from the 6 heads of the U.S. intelligence community, and their assessment is that the Russians feel their meddling in the 2016 presidential election was highly successful. They are laying the groundwork to meddle in the midterm elections later this year. And they also see the value of propaganda, the use of social media to spread their message, also what they call false flag operations, which gives them plausible deniability. And at one point, the senator from Maine, Angus King, seemed to be visibly frustrated, and he called on the president to also get involved.
My problem is I talk to people in Maine who say the whole thing is a witch hunt and it's a hoax because the president told me. I just wish you all could persuade the president as a matter of national security to separate these two issues. The collusion issue is over here, unresolved. We'll get to the bottom of that. We cannot confront this threat, which is a serious one, with a whole of government response when the leader of the government continues to deny that it exists.
There was another interesting moment when the CIA Director Pompeo was asked a question about a recent New York Times report that alleged the CIA had been taken in by a group who were purporting to sell NSA tools that had been stolen by Russians or those associated with the Russians. The CIA Director said it was the journalists who got played.
Reporting on this matter has been atrocious. It's been ridiculous, totally inaccurate. In our view, the suggestion the CIA was swindled is false. The people who were swindled were James Ricin and Matt Rosenberg, the authors of those two pieces.
The heads of the U.S. intelligence community will go back into a closed classified session about an hour and a half from now. That information will not be available to us for obvious reasons. But one of the sort of focuses of the hearing today is to really help set the budget priorities for the U.S. intelligence community. So we also had other information today about Russia, China, and North Korea, as well as al-Qaeda and ISIS. Harris.
All right, Catherine, very important and interesting information. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We are joined now by Republican Senator Joni Ernst, who sits on the Armed Services Committee. Thank you for being here this hour with us. I want to first ask you about how you think Christopher Wray, as FBI Director, can best get the notion that there might be bias inside his agency out of the way.
Well, thank you, Harris. I appreciate the opportunity. And I think the director does need to acknowledge that there are going to be differences of opinions in this matter, and I hope that he took those differences into consideration during this very rare and important meeting here on the Hill. It's important, again, as a member of the Armed Services Committee and as a veteran, that we're enabling our agencies with all of the tools and techniques necessary to protect our homeland.
When you, and I don't know how much the hearing you got to watch today and participate in just as taking notes, but there was one point where he was asked about Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, those two FBI agents having an affair, one of them assigned to a key element of the Russia investigation, sending each other anti-Trump messages. How would you describe his answer there?
Well, and unfortunately, I wasn't able to watch the hearing, but from what I have seen through media reports in the past about the relationship there, absolutely inappropriate, as well as their texts to each other were absolutely inappropriate for people in those positions.
Are you concerned that there's bias inside the FBI based on what we know?
Well, I am concerned because that issue has been brought up. Again, the Intel Committee will focus on this. They will get to the bottom of it. We have a number of investigations. And I would say, as I always do, let those investigations go where they may. Let's get to the bottom of this.
You know, you talk about the fact that you want to know all of the answers in all of this. I don't know how many we got, but there's a 2:30 p.m. Eastern meeting that will go behind closed doors. What would you be asking?
Well, I would be asking if you say that there is no bias, explain how there is no bias when we've seen comments that have come out of the agency. But as far as other issues, you know, as far as Russian collusion, again, those Intel committees will get to the bottom of it.
All right, let's move on to the other big topic today, and that is immigration. A short time ago, we were made aware here at Fox News that Senator Schumer is causing a bit of a delay in that unprecedented, I would call it, wide-ranging debate that we might publicly be able to get to see. He says that it's got to be, he doesn't want sanctuary cities talked about. He wants it all about DACA, Dreamers. What's your first reaction to that?
Well, I think all of this is interconnected, and so we do want to find a resolution for our DACA recipients. They're very important to our communities, but because we need to focus on DACA, then we do need to focus on border security and making sure that we're stopping illegal trafficking of humans, sex trafficking, drug trafficking. We need to talk about other caps that exist out there in our immigration policy. We need to talk about enforcement issues. And so all of that comes into play. And so I think Senator Schumer is being very disingenuous when he's not allowing us to talk about those other issues tied to immigration.
Well, right now, as far as the debate goes, he's being a sticky wicket, because I got to deal with some of the stuff that he's bringing up. My guest on set is also laughing. You'll see him shortly.
Yes.
So, Senator, I want to show you this President Trump tweet, because, you know, he has been so integral in getting this conversation into the bloodstream of America, like pretty much no other candidate that we have seen in the open era really do. Negotiations, he says in a tweet, on DACA have begun. Republicans want to make a deal, and Democrats say they want to make a deal. Wouldn't it be great if we could finally, after so many years, solve the DACA puzzle? This will be our last chance. There will never be another opportunity March 5th. Your thoughts?
I think this is a very important opportunity, and Leader McConnell has made it very clear that we will have an open and transparent process. We will take up amendments on the floor, and it's important that we have this debate because, again, our DACA recipients are very important. They're at the center of this issue. We want to make it right for them, but we also have to make it right for the American people, and that means we do need to take up issues like border security and making sure we're stopping those that are coming into the country illegally if we want to solve this problem permanently. So we need to have those open and honest debates. I hope that those Democrats more in the middle are willing to engage. I think it's really important if we really do want to find a solution.
Do you know of any Democrats that are willing to engage?
Yes, there are a number of them, and they have been engaged in numerous side conversations. We've had a lot of different working groups throughout this process, and all of us tend to agree on a number of the same points, to variations, of course, on those points. But that's when we have to start moving towards the middle. I think the pillars that were proposed by the president give us a great starting place.
You know, Senator, it's interesting because some of your colleagues on the other side of the political aisle have said that a wall is 14th century protection. I don't see a whole lot of middle ground with that. The president has said, oh, it's got to have a wall. Of course, it's a wall system. It's a lot of components to that. Last word from you on that.
Yes, I think a wall is important, but other than a physical wall, it won't be all the way across our border. We also need to utilize technology, whether it's unmanned aerial systems, whether it is radar detection, additional border security agents. All of that will be very important for border protection and border security. So I hope that they are willing to engage with us on it. I think finding an overall resolution for DACA is really important.
All right. You know, you have put forth a President Trump-inspired bill. And your last words, you're very modest not to even bring it up at this point, but I want to know all about it.
Yes, we do mirror the White House's proposal. So we are doing away with the diversity lotto. We are focusing on a pathway forward for our DACA recipients. We're putting border security and protection in place. And of course, we're focusing on family reunification and making sure that it is just with the nuclear family. So those are the 4 pillars that we're focusing on. I'm really glad to be part of that initiative, and I hope that it's given due consideration on the floor of the United States Senate.
Do you think it's conservative enough for your colleagues in the House, Republicans there?
I am hopeful that we will be able to present a plan that will work in the House as well. Again, is mirrored off of the White House's proposed policy, but I think it is conservative, especially when we look at those recipients. They are here through no fault of their own. A lot of them will argue amnesty, and I say you can't give amnesty to someone who hasn't broken the law.
Interesting. Senator Joni Ernst of the great state of Iowa, I'll bring you back on issues of veterans and the such. You slid that in there, and I want to hear more. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Harris. Thank you. For
more on today's hearing with the head of the FBI, you heard him. Let's bring in now Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. You know, when you hear, and we're going to talk a little bit more now about the Senate intelligence hearing that's going on. When you hear these questions and the comeback has been, well, we'll talk about it at 2:30 in a closed session. What are we supposed to take out of this hearing that's in a break right now and then resumes potentially in closed-door session?
Well, we have learned in the past 3 weeks that Congress is not above cherry-picking from raw intelligence data in order to create a political narrative, whether it's the Republicans pro-Trump or whether it's the Democrats anti-Trump. The Democrats' version hasn't come out yet. I'm talking about the narrative that has come out of the House Intelligence Committee. The committee hearing that we watched this morning was the Senate Intelligence Committee. When they do that, they are really exposing raw intelligence data for us to look at, because how do we know if their cherry picking is valid? We are entitled to see what's in there. Just like I have been arguing for a long time. It infuriates me when a senator asks a great question and the director of national intelligence or the director of the CIA or the director of the NSA says, I'll tell you at 2:30. I'll tell you at 2:30. The public's not allowed to know. These people work for us. We are allowed to know. I don't want to know something where the source is going to be harmed. We're not allowed to know everything, but we're allowed to know the parameters of what they are doing to keep us safe, and we're allowed to know the degree of danger that confronts them and confronts us, and we don't know it.
Well, and the lawmakers potentially are not in the position to question that because they don't know what the answer is going to be yet. So they can't even say if the American public can hear it because they have to hear it first.
Right. And then they take an oath not to reveal it before the confidential or the secret hearing begins at 2:30. The only way they can violate that oath is to go to the floor of the Senate where they're immune from any prosecution and just blurt it out there, which has happened, but that's rare.
Well, I tell you what, we're in the land of leaks.
Well, we are, and
that's that has how. You know what? I have, because I know the answer from you already, but remind us how that weakens us.
Well, it weakens us because, again, it allows the leaker to cherry pick what the leaker wants out there, and then it encourages other leakers to cherry pick some different narrative, and that causes the intelligence community to think twice before it complies with its legal obligation of answering Congress's questions, because they know that among the array of people in Congress who is questioning them are a couple of likely would-be leakers.
Wow. Okay, let's get back to the bias concerns of the FBI and what you learned today from the hearing from watching.
Well, Chris Wray is on the hot seat. I mean, he answered...
President Trump appointee.
Correct. He, the director of the FBI, answered under oath about Rob Porter, a diametrically different version of the background check than the White House gave. And, of course, he disagrees with the president's statement that the FBI is in tatters. I happen to think the president made that statement when he was angry about something that had happened. I hope the president doesn't mean that about the entire FBI. But, look, it's Chris Wray's job to defend the FBI, even if he has to antagonize the White House.
So with regard to the bias, what would you say about his answers today? You say he's in the hot seat. How hot did it get? I mean, you're going to have to convince the American people that his agency is neutral.
Right.
In terms of how it does its job.
It didn't get that hot, and it may get hotter again at 2:30 when the cameras are off and we're not allowed to know what happened. But Chris Wray's argument is, look, you have texts from 2 people, and you have allegations against another 5, McCabe and Orr and the others, the names that we know. There are 45,000 employees at the FBI. There are between 85 and 8,700 special agents who carry a badge and a gun and risk their lives every day. Please don't paint everyone with the brush with which you are painting these 5 people. That's his answer. The president says, look, this used to be the foremost law enforcement entity in the world, which had the highest respect. When this kind of stuff comes out, people second guess it. There's more of an opportunity for cross-examination in criminal cases, and that's not good.
Yeah, not to mention the fact that the Inspector General had to come in and find FBI text messages between 2 employees.
Well, that is yet to come. And if you think Chris Wray was on the hot seat today, just wait until that Inspector General report hits.
Judge, thank you so much.
Pleasure, Harris.
We get a lot from you.
Pleasure to be.
We're grateful. Congress gearing up to tackle immigration reform as conservative lawmakers warn House Speaker Paul Ryan to take a hard line on DACA or risk facing a revolt within his own ranks. Can Congress reach a deal? We'll talk about it more with our power panel coming up. And a new report, decades-old documents regarding independent counsel Ken Starr's investigation into President Bill Clinton at the time are about to be made public. Whether the information could shed light on Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich is going to join me. Stay close. Fox News alert, a federal court is reportedly set to unseal long secret documents stemming from the former independent counsel Ken Starr's investigation into then President Bill Clinton following a request from CNN. The network argued the documents could shed light on how current special counsel Robert Mueller is conducting his Russia probe and how he could handle possible testimony from President Trump. Let's bring in now Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, managing the investigation of President Clinton that would eventually lead to his impeachment. He's also a Fox News contributor, the perfect person to talk about this. Thank you for joining us, Speaker. So, is there a connection between Ken Starr's, these unsealed documents we will see in his investigation and what we're seeing now?
I have no idea. I think there are certain patterns that develop with all these independent counsels. And in that sense, it's worth looking at all of them going back to the Reagan years and up through George W. Bush's period. But I think I frankly didn't realize that there were documents that were secret, that were sealed away. And I'd be very curious, unlike the documents we're looking at today, I'm not sure what the national security reason was for sealing them or why they were sealed. I hope Ken Starr will speak out and help explain this. So it came as a little bit of a surprise to me to realize how many documents there were that the public was not aware of.
Why is that surprising?
Well, because in the absence of a national security reason for secrecy, I'm not quite sure why the country couldn't see what Ken Starr had discovered. Whether it helped Clinton or it hurt Clinton, I often think that letting the people themselves have direct access to knowledge is the best way to run a country. In that sense, I'm a little bit like Thomas Jefferson. I do think knowledge, people having knowledge, people knowing what's going on, is very healthy for a free country.
Interesting. From what you recall back to that investigation and where we are right now with the Robert Mueller investigation, can you talk about the comparisons, the differences that you think we need to know?
Well, I think they're very different. I actually think Mueller's investigation is much closer to the Patrick Fitzgerald investigation under George W. Bush, which was a remarkably dangerous and illegitimate investigation into a situation that they knew wasn't a crime and is really worth studying. And Comey is the person who appointed Fitzpatrick, so there are a lot of really interesting parallels. I think in the case of that you're looking at in the 1990s, you really had this ongoing process of evolution. I mean, the Clintons managed to stay embroiled, whether it was in cattle futures or it was in the Rose Law Firm or in Travelgate or in the various problems involving with Whitewater as an investment, all the way up through the problems of committing perjury. And all those things just kept adding up for year after year, and Starr got involved in several of them. It'll be interesting to see how he made the decision to keep moving forward and who he was reporting to who gave him permission to keep moving forward.
It's so fascinating to talk to you about this. I mean, you were there at the time, just previous, and when it was happening, the impeachment of Bill Clinton. And what you're saying is there were things that were leading up to it. You know, we hear over and over that there's no evidence yet that we've seen, even from Democrats. So it's a bipartisan agreement that there was collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, we have no evidence. There's actually no reason to believe it's true. And we've had an increasing amount of evidence of collusion in the opposite direction. I mean, most of the collusion we've seen so far has been FBI Director Comey beginning to write his exoneration of Hillary Clinton 2 months before she was interviewed. The most recent, I thought the most amazing text message from Strzok, the FBI agent, to his girlfriend, the Justice Department attorney, that they were developing a briefing for Comey because, quote, President Obama wants to know everything. I wasn't aware that Comey was briefing President Obama on these things. And every time you turn around, there's some new part of this, most of which illustrates that the Justice Department at the senior levels and the FBI at the senior levels was trying to protect Secretary Clinton and trying to block President Trump so that if there's been collusion, it wasn't in the Kremlin, it was in the Justice Department.
You know, before I let you go, you are the perfect person to ask this question, and I've asked it over and over about accountability. If there is bias to be found, I mean, it seems like there's not a whole lot within the government. Like, we have all these hearings, we do all these things, and then in the end, we're all left to say, well, what did we do all of this for? The FBI, the DOJ, if there's found to be bias...
I think you're right. Look, I think you're exactly right. I want to draw a distinction between the 98% of the people who work for the FBI who are honest, hardworking, serious enforcers of the law. But you clearly had a layer here that should face very serious consequences. And you clearly had, I think, whether it's the 33,000 emails that were deleted, which was illegal, or having a server at home, which was illegal, or the relationship with the Clinton Foundation, or the Uranium One decision, you get down all this entire long list. The fact that there's, A, no accountability for the players, starting with Secretary Clinton, and B, there's no accountability for the people who we now have more and more evidence were basically covering it up and trying to protect her. It's pretty astonishing, and it's wrong.
Former Speaker Newt Gingrich, I appreciate you also sticking. We had a little bit of a time delay, and we worked right through it, so I thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you.
New testimony from FBI Director Christopher Wray is raising questions now. We've been watching it live on Fox News now. They're in a bit of a break. They come back. Potentially that will be closed doors, so we're watching for that. About the White House's timeline of events we're talking about leading up to the resignation of former Staff Secretary Rob Porter over domestic abuse allegations. A live report ahead. Stay close. We alert in now. New testimony from FBI Director Christopher Wray is now raising questions over the White House's version of events leading up to the resignation of former Staff Secretary Rob Porter. Porter's 2 ex-wives have accused him of domestic violence and a girlfriend as well. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live with the latest on this. John?
And we were watching the Intelligence Committee meeting there in the Senate. We saw Christopher Wray come up, and we were all sort of taken aback because Wray, with a single statement, really just completely blew up the timeline that the White House has been giving us about this Rob Porter file and the investigation into his security clearance. The White House has insisted that it did not know of the full allegations against Rob Porter, which includes the allegation that he punched his first wife, Colby Holderness, in the eye while they were on vacation in Italy, giving her a black eye. The White House was not aware of all of that, we're told, until last Tuesday. What's more, the White House is insisting that the investigation into Porter's clearance was ongoing, had not been completed. But listen to what the FBI director said about an hour and a half ago.
The FBI submitted a partial report on the investigation in question in March, and then a completed background investigation in late July. That is, soon thereafter, we received requests for follow-up inquiry, and we did the follow-up and provided that information in November, and that we administratively closed the file in January. And then earlier this month, we received some additional information, and we passed that on as well.
Now, contrast that with the official White House position that we heard from the press secretary yesterday in the White House daily briefing.
Look, we learned of the extent of the situation involving Rob Porter last Tuesday evening, and within 24 hours, his resignation had been accepted and announced.
Now, his first wife, Colby Holden, has told Fox News that she did an interview with the FBI on January 25th of last year. She told them of all of the incidents, including the black eye, she says, was the result of Porter punching her while they were on vacation. She also provided the photos to the FBI. Now, we do not know what was in that preliminary report that the FBI, according to Christopher Wray, gave to the White House in March, but we do know that they would have had in their possession all of those allegations and all of the photographs. It's going to be a big topic at the briefing this afternoon, no question about that. In addition, Fox News has been told that Porter was up for an expanded role at the White House. Jim Carroll, one of the deputy chiefs of staff, was leaving to become the drug czar at the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and the White House was talking with Porter about taking over some, if not all, of Carroll's duties.
All right,
Harris?
John Roberts, I know that you are going to scoot to the briefing. We appreciate you coming in and telling us the details ahead of that. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay, let's bring in Stephen Hayes, editor-in-chief of the Weekly Standard and Fox News contributor. Steve, always great to see you. I know that your publication is also covering this story. So Rob Porter is gone. A second employee of the White House accused of domestic violence of their staff is gone. And you've got some indiscrepancy, I guess some discrepancies between the timeline of the FBI, and the White House. What is the takeaway in all of this? What is the news in all of this moving forward?
Well, I think there are two. One is the White House quite plainly didn't take seriously credible allegations of domestic abuse leveled against at least one of its very senior officials for the better part of almost a year. And number two, the White House didn't tell the truth about what transpired as it relates to these allegations. I think the clips you showed before you talked to John made that abundantly clear. The White House was telling one story. Christopher Wray is telling an entirely different story. And we have heard in news reports from the ex-wives of Rob Porter that they had been talking to the FBI about these allegations long before the White House suggests that they
You know what's confusing to me? On the one hand, like with Robert Mueller's investigation into the Trump campaign and collusion with Russia, we say that we don't know what the FBI has and we can't expect to know. Yet with this, we want to know what the FBI has and we expect to know. So I'm a little confused because the White House may have known some things that potentially they couldn't make public, or there may have been some things that the FBI didn't tell them. I'm just asking the questions. I'm curious to why there are two different sets of circumstances there in terms of what we're allowed to know that the FBI has.
Well, I'm not sure I follow exactly, but I think the question for me is if the White House, I wouldn't have expected the White House to make this information public about Rob Porter if they've gotten this as part of their
You say that they weren't
background.
truthful.
Well, I think if you listen to the testimony that Christopher Wray just gave under oath and you marry that with the allegations that were made that strike me as incredibly plausible by both of his ex-wives and an ex-girlfriend, it suggests to me that that there was something wrong here. And it suggests to me at least that the White House didn't take seriously these allegations. But that's why I was very careful when I made the points that I made. On the one hand, the White House didn't take this seriously early enough because we now know that there were these reports. And Rob Porter continued to get promoted. On the other hand, we know that their timeline, what they've said about the timeline, simply wasn't true. Yeah,
I guess I press in because so you're leaving the door open to maybe the White House was wrong. There are several people there who would have done the communications gathering on this subject. So we'll have to see in the next press briefing where they go with this. But real quickly, the president has said that he does care about domestic victims. What's your take on where we are now in the language coming out of the White House?
Well, I think it'd be helpful for the president to say that publicly himself in a more forceful way. You know, he said that in the person of Sarah Huckabee Sanders yesterday, but earlier he had tweeted sort of regrets about Rob Porter leaving the White House and raised the possibility that he'd been falsely accused. Look, I think it is important that, you know, Rob Porter, if this were in a court of law, would have the opportunity to offer a defense and to defend himself, and we shouldn't prejudge. On the other hand, when you're looking at what's the information that's available publicly, it doesn't look very good for Rob Porter, and I think it was a tonal problem with the President of the United States seeming to take the side of this senior aide without really having much to say at all about the two women who claimed that they were abused by Rob Porter.
Yeah, a lot of questions on why the White House timeline doesn't match that of the FBI. Thank you, Stephen Hayes.
Thanks,
appreciate your time. How conservatives reportedly are warning Speaker Paul Ryan to take a hardline stance on immigration. Whether that's a realistic approach ahead of a brutal immigration debate, we know it's brutal. Senator Schumer's stopping it right now because he says it's going to be too wide-ranging, so they haven't even started the debate yet. Power Panel weighs in. Stay here. Both chambers of Congress are gearing up for an interesting and potentially brutal immigration debate. This, as The Hill is now reporting, frustrated conservative lawmakers are pressuring House Speaker Paul Ryan to put a hardline immigration bill on the floor in the coming weeks or risk a revolt within his own ranks. The right reportedly feels burned in the wake of recent budget negotiations. House Freedom Caucus member Jim Jordan said, quote, "The budget bill that passed last week wasn't consistent with what we told the voters we were going to do. We had better get it right on immigration." Let's bring in a power panel indeed. Jake Maccabee is a former chief speechwriter for U.S. Attorneys General Loretta Lynch and Eric Holder. Steve Lonigan is a former Ted Cruz campaign director for the state of New Jersey. Great to see you both. Steve, I'm going to start with this. Within the ranks, there could be a problem. Why?
Well, the ranks include all the people who voted for Donald Trump, who ran an agenda of building a wall and reforming our immigration program. It was a very powerful message. So when you talk about Speaker Ryan potentially dissing the conservative base, it's a lot more than that. It's the entire base that has now moved into the Republican Party and put this country in a whole new direction. I think we better be careful to remember it's the president we're talking about here and his agenda, not just the conservative base.
Jake?
Well, you know, I think we have to talk about the fact that the country is more than just the base of the Republican Party. And if Speaker Ryan had any political courage at all, he would step forward with a clean DACA bill that could pass the House and the Senate, could sail right through. You get it passed today.
So the president...
What does that mean by a clean DACA bill? Just give amnesty